What's up, guys? It is Rowan here from Art of Smart Education. Welcome to our webinar. We're doing a live Q&A, how to ace the HSC while stuck at home during COVID-19. Welcome to everyone. I can see we have about almost 50 people that have jumped on live for today, which is fantastic. Now, just some context before we dive in for today. Today's a little different. We ran an earlier webinar a week and a half or so ago where I had a full presentation that I delivered and then I went through questions. What happened in that last presentation was you guys had so many questions for me that I couldn't get through all of them. So the point of today is a little bit more Q&A style. As part of registering for this webinar, we had you just complete a super quick survey, which was where you got to submit your top 3 burning questions that you would like me to hopefully answer for you. What I have done is I have them sitting on a screen here, all of your questions. There were over 100 once again. So I won't be able to answer all of them, but what did emerge was some key themes across a lot of the questions that you have identified. And so as a result, what I'm going to endeavor to do today is to go through these questions and actually answer them. So it's going to be more Q&A style. I'm going to get your questions and I'll do my best to answer them. So let's jump in and really start to unpack COVID-19 Q&A. And where I want to start with is one of the big themes that came up was a number of you are asking about what was going to happen with Year 11 results being used for university. So, one of the questions I had, which was asked by Nicolette, was, do you think that using Year 11 results will happen for university entry? And, is it unfair that Year 11 results are being used? So what I want to highlight as question number 1 that we're going to unpack is really what on earth is going to happen with uni admissions? Because I think clearly this has been a bit of a big point of concern. And so what I want to highlight, guys, here is, I guess, really number 1, yes, we know that ANU and Macquarie University have now made an announcement that Year 11 results can be used and in fact will be used as part of their admission process. Now at the moment, these are the only 2 universities that have made this announcement. And I think something to highlight here is that Macquarie Uni already were using their Year 11 results as part of their early entry application process. And a significant proportion of students that got into Macquarie Uni were getting in on the basis of early entry application regardless. So it's not a huge change for Macquarie Uni. In the case of ANU, it is, again, not a huge change because last year they announced for 2020 they were going to move off a complete ATAR-focused system for entry anyway. So it's not surprising that both of these universities have announced that Year 11 will be used as part of their admission process. I guess the question here is, will this extend to other universities? And look, I think that's a little unclear at the moment because we're still, not yet certain what's going to happen with even this term of, is it online? What's happening with assessments? I think what will be likely, though, is that the universities will become a lot more flexible on entry. Now, how are they going to do this? Well, it's not going to happen through lowering the ATAR. So I don't want any of you to get too excited about, yes, okay, universities are, they're going to lower the ATARs. I think what we've got to look at is a significant portion of university revenue comes from the international student market. Given the restrictions that are placed globally due to Corona, the international student market has collapsed, really. The Australian government has maintained the funding requirements or the promised funding above and beyond for domestic students. So there's a guarantee there that there'll be government funding for domestic students to universities, but they are losing a lot of revenue when it comes to the position of their international students. So it's a little bit of an interesting situation because they're going to be wanting to find ways to bring more students on board to their university. But at the same time, they've still got guaranteed funding for domestic students from the Australian government. Now, what does all of this mean? I'll stop going into this rabbit warren for you. The practical application here is that they're going to want to accept as many students as possible domestically, but they're not going to want to reduce ATARs because that has implications in what we call the signaling effect. The signaling effect essentially refers to, if an ATAR is low, we make an assumption that it must not be therefore a very good course. It must not be very popular. There must not be very many good job prospects. So universities, generally speaking, will not lower ATARs, but what they will look to do is probably implement a number of additional alternate entry schemes to get in. That's what Macquarie and ANU are already doing. Remember, they have already led the way in being a little more creative with early entry / alternate entry applications prior to Corona hitting. So what does this mean? Yes, I think it will mean that other universities will come to the table. They will open up more flexible entry in terms of, whether or not it's early entry, whether or not it's some more bonus points, or whether or not, yes, they may make it optional for Year 11 results to count. I think that would probably be the better outcome ultimately. The question that Nicolette asked was, is it unfair? And I get that many of you may not have actually really tried all that much for Year 11. And so you're looking at your Year 11 results right now and thinking, oh, geez, this is not a great outcome. And so, look, my hope will be that they will end up using an option whereby, there's a choice, right? You can perhaps, if you haven't done as well in Year 12 because of what's happened, maybe there's an option to go back to some of your Year 11 results and use that, almost as in consideration for the misadventure that has occurred or the illness potentially as a result of Corona. If, of course, though, maybe you do really well in Year 12 still because you continue to work hard, my hope would be that then that pathway still exists. You will still get an ATAR, so that pathway will exist. UAC has confirmed that. So, look, I think that's going to be the likely outcome, that you will still get an ATAR. There will be a bunch of universities that will still accept you. All of them will still accept you on the basis of ATAR, but there will be some additional pathways created. So therefore, if you were negatively impacted by Corona, it may be that Year 11 results could be counted to contribute to support you, and your application to get into that particular university course. So hopefully that answers that question. If you do have follow-up questions about this, guys, as I'm sort of explaining this, I have the chat open here. So I can see your chat as well. So by all means, right, as I'm explaining any of these things, just ask follow-up questions in relation to this. Otherwise, it's going to feel a little awkward for me just to keep on riffing for an hour purely based on just the submitted questions, although I will be using that. So in short, I think here that there is some good news overall for you, which hopefully will reduce the stress. I think just to summarize, I think the good news here is, number one, you will receive an ATAR, so you will be able to get into university via an ATAR. And number two, if that's maybe not that crash hot, I think they will open up Year 11 results as like a fail-safe or a backup as part of alternate entry schemes. But as I said, it's a little bit hard to tell just yet, short of looking at just the two universities that are there. Great. So we've got, do you think they'll introduce new scholarships or government assistance for 2021 university students? Look, I don't think, who knows, honestly, right? The scale and the speed of which the government has announced things has been unprecedented. What I would say is actually some of the universities are announcing their own funding for students. So UNSW, as an example right now, have announced funding for existing students that you can apply for. So if you feel like you're in hardship, there is a pool of funding they've made available. That may happen. So as a result, we may see some more scholarships emerge. Again, it's a little early to tell, and universities are most likely really scrambling right now. Are Year 11 results very important for early entry at Macquarie? Look, my understanding is not massively, in the sense of they're not wanting them to be entirely horrible. At the same time, though, it is part of the questions that they focus on are really looking at your contributions broader than just academics. So they are trying to get a sense of what are your contributions with leadership, community, volunteering. And so my understanding from the experience we've had in supporting students apply successfully for them is that, more weighting is placed on that part of the application, although your Year 11 results are part of the application. So they will go towards the decision that Macquarie University make around the offers that they make. We do have another question from Prashant here. Prashant, saying some universities want us to do voluntary experience or activities outside of school, but we don't have the opportunity to do them due to Corona. Yes, that is a really good challenge. So part of this alternate entry that's going to emerge, okay, that we're going to see here, guys, that ANU has already announced as an example, does require extracurricular sort of commitments. Now, of course, the challenge with that is if you haven't already done these, you're in a bit of a sticky situation. I'm not going to lie. Okay, the sticky situation is you may not have then the opportunity to be able to go out and do some things to add to your application. Now, that's not to say there are not some things that you could try to do while you're in isolation right now and we're in lockdown. So I think the point of it is that you can get creative. What are things that you could do to organize things for your local community in the current challenging times, right? What are things you could do for your local school, the school that you attend, to support them? There are opportunities to still volunteer. It might be supporting people. It might be running like a local community initiative to help people during Corona. It might be creating a resource or something really cool. Whether or not it's a video, it's a podcast, it's interviewing someone to provide advice and suggestions and tips. There are things you can do like that that don't require you to leave your home, that use digital tools that could then still be used as a extracurricular commitment activity that shows volunteering, leadership, giving back to community, all those sorts of things. So I'd encourage you to get creative. There are still plenty of opportunities that do emerge that you could still engage in, but yes, it's going to require a little more initiative. It's not as though you're going to be able to sign up for something and then turn a lot, maybe to volunteer for Mission Australia or, the Salvos, right? They're fantastic, but in some sense, you turn up and everything's organized for you. So it will require more initiative without a doubt. Now, how does ATAR work for interstate universities? Yes, we now are pretty much on a national system for ATAR. That's great. Queensland used to not be. They've recently come on board. Basically, that means that you'll get an ATAR and each of the interstate universities will have ATAR cutoffs for their courses as well. So the great thing about that is it means that you've got a national system that you can now use, so that you can get your ATAR in New South Wales and be able to work out, therefore, in other states with the specific universities, whether or not that ATAR will be sufficient to get you into that course. So hopefully, that answers that sort of first question that we've had here, which is like big picture, okay? What's happening with universities? Unknown, but I think overall, you're going to be in a better position because you're going to have the ATAR still. While that might be more challenging, there will be greater flexibility and Year 11 potentially as a backup sort of fail-safe. Good news. So let me continue, guys, and I'll create a new page for this sort of next group of questions. Now, the next sort of theme that I saw in the questions that you guys sort of submitted was, I think, really, well, there was a lot relating, I think, to motivation. I think that was a really, really big challenge that everyone was experiencing. So motivation and how to stay motivated during Corona. So I think it's worth us having a chat about this one because I think this is obviously going to be a huge impact on the sort of work that you guys put in and therefore the sorts of results that you end up creating for yourself, which I'm really mindful of. So what are some things you can do to stay motivated? Look, there's no easy answer here. What I will highlight, and this is really important, is that we often view motivation as a feeling, okay? So we feel motivated or we don't feel motivated. And so, right now, everything around us is, pretty grim. And as a result, our motivation, we just don't feel it, right? We just don't feel like doing work. And therefore, if we wait for a feeling, then the idea is, well, I need to feel something to actually take a certain action. And so we really view that this relationship, okay, looks like this, where we need to have the feeling to take the action. Now, the real inherent challenge with this, okay, is that if we wait to feel something, do we consistently ever really take action? Well, no, I think probably what it looks like is if we were to look at, this is your, sort of effort or action, right, over the course of time, what probably it ends up looking like is something like this. And maybe all it actually looked like, unfortunately, was that. Okay, just a complete collapse. And that's because we rely on feeling. And so it's why sort of a lot of short-term things like just, watching a YouTube video, or to be honest, although I hope I can motivate you a little bit, you turning up to a webinar like this might give you a short hit of motivation, right? That's the sort of short hit that we see here, this initial sort of period, and then the feeling disappears, 10 minutes later, an hour later, maybe 2 days later, and we don't get a whole lot of consistent work done. So really critically, we need to actually move away from waiting to feel like doing something, and to sort of shift our relationship. Now, the simplest way to think about this, and this might not be a satisfying answer, but it's an important answer, okay, is actually we can take actions first, and then it can lead us, sorry guys, my drawing is horrible, you're gonna have to put up with it. It can then lead us to have a feeling. Now, what I mean by this, I don't know, have you guys ever found that you've had to sit somewhere and do some work, your teachers made you do it, whatever's happened, and you did not want to do it to start with, and as you started doing it, you actually started getting into the zone, and actually you discovered it wasn't so bad. Or maybe, right, your parents have got you to, I don't know, do a chore, I don't know, wash the dishes or something, or cook dinner, and you really didn't want to do it, and then as you got into it, it started happening. So this is the key thing, right? What actually happens is that if we take actions, often the feelings will come as a result. And so what we shouldn't do is we shouldn't rely on a feeling to get work done. Really dangerous. Honestly, you guys will not get a whole lot done. What we want to rely on is taking an action first and making a commitment to taking action first. A commitment to taking action. And then often what happens is the feeling, it actually grows and builds over time. And so that's why we actually refer to motivation being a little bit more like a muscle, okay, which is something that gets stronger over time. And this is what we saw in all the research that we've done, guys, with high-performing students. So everything I'm sharing with you today in answer to all of these questions is, based on research that I've done over the last decade with, over 2,500, students that scored ATARs over 98. What we saw was that they didn't rely on a feeling to get work done. They actually took action. Now, what does this look like? I want to make this practical. That's just an idea that I want you to sit with, which is, hey, don't wait to feel like doing something. We need to do it first. How do we do it? Well, in terms of the how, there's a couple of things we can do. The first thing is we want to actually identify what's the smallest possible action that I can take. Because often one of the things that gets in the way is that we build up the size of the action in our mind. We've got to do all this study, and it just becomes overwhelming. We don't do anything. So we want to identify the smallest possible action that you can take. Simple way to do this, and look, this is basic, guys, and I really hope you're doing it. I'm going to unpack a whole bunch of basic strategies that flow off this. Really basic is actually write a to-do list and do so every day. Don't just do it when you feel like it, or every second day, or when you're doing some study. Write it. Write the to-do list. And in that to-do list, I want you to write one small action, the smallest possible action that you will start with. And that's all your commitment is. You're just going to start with this one single thing. Now, the point of this is that, and I'm seeing your questions coming through, guys, and so I'll do my best to also try to answer those in addition to the 100 or so submitted prior. So the key thing, guys, I want you to just write a to-do list, identify the smallest action, and start with it. So that's really sort of part number one for this, okay, in terms of how we start changing that relationship and actually getting motivated. Part number two, as part of that, is, yes, the Pomodoro is a great way to do it, which someone mentioned, and then someone asked, what is the Pomodoro? Yep, Caleb, it is the tomato technique. And yes, Mina, this will be recorded so that you can rewatch it later on as well. Pomodoro technique, nice and simple. It means tomato in Italian. Essentially, it's 25-minute increments of study, which are focused study, so no distraction, and then you get a 5-minute break, and then you rinse and repeat, and you try to basically create a tally of Pomodoros. So you would set, okay, maybe at the start of a day, hey, my goal is going to be I'm going to get through 6 Pomodoros, and then as you go, you just start tallying it up. Now, the point of this is we're trying to, again, make the actions as small as possible so you get started, okay? And then once you're started, it's going to be so much easier. Now, the third and final thing I want to touch upon here, and then I'll answer some other questions, but this actually answers a question I got. I had a number of you going, hey, how do I actually just get back into the zone? I feel like so much has happened in terms of my friends are not really doing any work right now, so I'm not really getting motivated. I feel like I haven't done very well already, so what's the point? I think really what's really critical here is to actually zoom out and look at the big picture. And I just want to zoom out and share this big picture for you, because this actually is a really powerful reason why, one, you should not quit. So really importantly, you should not quit. And also why now is the time to essentially double down on your study. So why is this the case? Well, let's go look on this page here. So what I want to highlight is right now, if we think about the year, okay, where we're at right now is we had term 4 over here, we had term 1 here, we've got, term 2, which is where we're at, we've got term 3, and then we've got, so a couple of things that are going to happen, okay. We are now essentially, if we just change this, let's draw a little stick figure, we are right here, right now, okay. We're in the April school holidays. We will have HSC trials occur just here, okay, and we will have HSC exams occur just here. Now, the reason, my iPad just collapsed, the reason I want to share that with you is, okay, if we look at this in terms of time, okay, the real sort of painful thing is that this looks like roughly 50% plus of the way through your HSC in terms of time, okay? That's really, really critical. But actually, if we look at the amount of assessments you've done, okay, let's just change up the color here. You would have had one assessment here. So we've got, number 1 here, and we've had number 2 here. Okay, now both of those combined, if we actually sort of combine these, first assessment was probably worth about 20%, second assessment was worth about 25%. Total that you've done right now is 45%, but remember, everything you do internally is only worth 50%. So 50% internal for your HSC, 50% external for your HSC. So that means we literally halve this, okay? So it means that all you have sat right now is 22.5% of your HSC. What does that mean? Well, it means that there is some really good news. And the really good news is you have right now, and I'm going to do this as big as I can, 77.5% of your HSC marks still left on the table for you, okay? So really, really critical, 77, oh yeah, good suggestion, Alison, you're right. I could have made the thickness a little bit there to emphasize the 77.5%, but that's really critical. So if we look at motivation, just to come back, right? 1, I want you to start doing actions regardless if you feel like it. You're going to do that by writing a to-do list and picking the smallest action that you can take and starting with that. That's going to build the momentum and build your motivation muscle. You're going to use the Pomodoro technique, create a goal for the number of tallies, start small, and you can actually stretch the size of that time limit as you build that muscle, right? And then what you are going to do, final step, is you're going to zoom out and appreciate that you have 77.5% of your internals, your total HSC on the table. Right, so right now that means if, to answer the question that I received by some students, if yes, you have screwed up year 12, okay, so far. So you've done your first 2 assessments and you haven't done very well. The amazing news here, guys, is that actually you can significantly change your results, massively change your results, because you've got the bulk available. But the only way that's going to happen is if you actually get work done. So my hope is that this sort of perspective shift will actually help you get a little more motivated, okay? Really, really important. So yes, Nicolette has asked, can you still do well with a bad rank? Well, yes, at the moment, okay, if we think about this, you've like honestly, what we typically see is if we look at like a distribution of marks, right? Usually what we see happen, so if this is, like the marks and this is the frequency here, okay, in a grade, most of the time, it will look like this, and the bulk of students will be all very tightly ranked, okay? So there'll be a lot of tightly ranked students, And that's only because there's been 2 assessments. What will happen, so that means even if your ranks are not that great there, because they weren't worth a huge amount either, you have still internally, right, 55%. We've still got 55% internally of your marks available. So what we typically see happen is in HSC trials, that's where we start to see what we call rank dispersion. So you start to see a little bit more dispersion between the ranks because there starts to be a bigger range in marks. Some students do better, others do worse. And that's actually a huge opportunity for you to significantly improve your ranks if you do well in the trials in your next assessment. Particularly trials as well, because it's an examination of all of the content, and that's really where people sort of, make or break in some respects. Rank dispersion starts to happen. I mean, that naturally happens across more data points anyway, but it certainly starts to happen here. And so the trials end up being a fantastic opportunity for you to certainly significantly improve your rank, which will therefore improve, to some extent, the moderation that you receive in your internal results. I say to some extent, because it also depends on how your cohort performs as well. So hopefully that answers that question. So I'm just going to jump across and continue to go through some of the questions that were submitted to me over here as well. So we've got, let's have a look. Okay, so this was one specific to COVID, but I think this is relevant. And this is relevant because we've got, really, guys, we've got about 14 weeks until HSC trials. So I did the maths actually before today, and I don't want to scare you, but there's 101 days roughly until trials start. And I say roughly because most schools start their trials around the 1st of August. The dates may shift as a result, okay, due to, Corona, of course. 101 days is not a lot of time. As I said, it's about 14 weeks. And so what we need to think about here is if we've got, a limited set of time, what do you need to start doing to prepare for that, regardless of Corona going on, okay, because that's going to happen. Now, the first thing I want to highlight, and this is the question was submitted here by Ruby. Ruby asked, I'm going to need to like do a written exam, and you're going to have to do a written set of trials. But right now, how do you actually, with online learning, get like written tasks into your teachers, okay? And I think that's important. So one of the things I want to highlight for you is just because everything is being done with online at the moment, that does not mean that you should not. In fact, it means that it's more critical than ever to actually practice still doing handwritten tasks. Okay, that means handwriting in terms of essays, because one of the critical things we see happen every year is that students get to their trials, haven't done enough handwriting, practice essay responses, and then they're struggling with time. It's a 2-3 hour exam paper. The volume of writing is quite significant for some of the humanities, for example, and students can really struggle, okay? So my point being here is that I would really be encouraging you, even, yes, if you're doing online learning, to still do written task practice, okay? And I'll unpack that a little bit more. The critical question that Ruby had was, well, great, if I do this, how do I get it to my teacher? Okay, and that's a good point. So what I want to highlight is my recommendation here would be there are a number of fantastic apps that you can use on your phone that are essentially scanning apps. Okay, there are a bunch for free, there are a bunch that you can pay for, but my recommendation here would be basically to go and download them, and that way you do your handwritten work, you scan it up, it actually produces it as a PDF. If I could write PDF, that would be great. And that way you simply just email it to your teacher for feedback, okay? Really, really critical, but I'd really highlight continue to do that, okay? Really important. Now, zooming out, what does this mean at the moment in terms of getting ready for trials with all of the uncertainty? Well, I would, guys, make an assumption that trials will happen around the 1st of August. It will happen in roughly 14 weeks. And therefore, what we would start suggesting is that you guys do something really, really simple, which is we call it our wall charting process at AOSTV, and we support students with our Pathfinder program, sort of mapping this out. But in essence, it's working out, okay, for each of the weeks that are coming, and I'm not going to do this for all of them, right, all the way up to week 10 for this term, for each of your subjects, what are the key things that you need to start doing, particularly around revision? Because remember, that what's going to happen is you're going to be examined on the entirety of your course. Maybe some tweaks will happen due to Corona, but again, we want to assume the worst right now. And therefore, if you're going to be examined on the entire HSC course in 14 weeks, okay, we want to work backwards from there. Okay, we want to work backwards to go, okay, what are the key topics that I need to be doing in each of these weeks, working backwards? And in fact, what you want to focus on, and I'd recommend you go through each of your key courses and identify where are your weak areas. Do that now, okay? Because then you will have the entire term to start progressively working on them before you actually get to there and go, oh, bugger, I'm in real trouble now, okay? So really, really critically, I'd recommend identify your weak areas now and then start to put a plan in place for the weeks in which you're going to start proactively working on these weak areas. Now, a question that I think Prashant had, and it did come up in the questions that were submitted digitally as well, which is fantastic, is at what point should you start doing past papers to prep for your trials? Well, look, I think in part, in answer to this question, really as early as possible, but hear me out here. There is a bit of strategy around this that we would certainly recommend, okay? The first thing here, and thanks guys for the suggestion for the scanners. There's Adobe Scanner, Cam Scanner, Tiny Scanner. I love that coming through in the chat. As early as possible. What I mean by this is what you can start doing is you don't need to do a complete paper in one sitting. Because let's be honest, if you're already unmotivated, that's like setting the huge challenge of a 2 to 3 hour thing. You're not going to do it. So in keeping with our idea of building that motivation muscle and building momentum, our suggestion here is rather than doing them as in a complete sitting, right? What we're going to say is, hey, let's not do it in a complete setting. Actually, let me just use red for that to make it clearer. Let's not do it in a complete sitting right now. Let's actually do something else. Let's instead identify our weak areas and find, past paper questions that target those. Okay, that's going to be a more effective use of time. That means that you're going to be able to integrate it more easily week to week as you go throughout the term, which is going to be really important. And so that way you can also then start to really lean into the more difficult areas of the course. So I would suggest that if we go back up to this plan, that you're starting to do that, a little bit each week, all right? You just integrate it, because then by the time you get to here, the sum total of all those sort of little questions that you've been doing means that you've actually done a bunch of past papers, but you've done them, deconstructed, okay, if that makes sense. So the way that we would view this is it's really a deconstructed past paper strategy. So hopefully that answers that question. And that would be the key strategy here that we would recommend, okay? Deconstructed past paper strategy. So let me jump in and continue answering some of your questions. So another question that I've had that's come through here in our Q&A was, okay, I have to study all day. And this was asked by Brittany. I have to study all day at home, right? I'm at home, studying all day at home. And then I have to do more study again at home after school is finished, and I'm really struggling with that. Okay, really big sort of challenge area, and I've seen this happen for a lot of students, okay, that are sort of getting this part fine, they're nailing that, okay, and then they're getting here, and they're just like, oh man, this is not happening, okay, really, really struggling. So what I want to find out in the chat while I sort of share a couple of things is, how are you guys handling this, okay? How have you guys been managing this challenge of, having to back up essentially and do like the same, a whole bunch of extra work, but sit at home for it, okay? Not well, okay. So look, what I would recommend here is really critical. Finish school if it's 3 p.m. or whatever time school ends, okay, which is your finish time, and get up and move, okay? Do not sit there and just go, oh, okay, I'll take like a 20-minute break watching YouTube and then I'll start some study, okay? Whatever you do, get up and move. And great suggestions, Henry, Caleb, Sania. These are fantastic, okay? The critical thing is, number one that I'm going to recommend is move, okay? Changing spaces actually shows that, you know, they've done research that show if you change the space around you, it actually changes your frame of mind and it re-energizes you. So change the space. Now, it might not be permanent, but if you can, maybe organize with family members at home, where during school you're in one place and then after you're in another, so that you can start creating different zones. That may not be possible, but if you can, amazing. If you can't change space, just move and get out of your room. Okay, and if you can, definitely, number 2, do a bit of exercise, okay? Even if it's just going for a walk, a whole lot of data and research shows it's going to improve your cognitive performance and therefore improve your focus. Okay, so this will improve your focus for when you return to study, which is really, really key, okay? Now, the other thing that I would recommend in all of this as well is, you know, we've got move, we've got exercise. Actually do something fun in the break. Do something that creates a little bit of a transition. Now, you want to set a timer on this because, of course, the risk can be that you end up, you know, getting sucked down the vortex of your favorite pastime, gaming, YouTube, Netflix, whatever it is, and you don't come back. So I would set a really clear, like, okay, cool, this is going to be a 45-minute or a 60-minute timer, right, where I get to do something fun, and that means that, you know, I'm back at 4:15 p.m. That is my non-negotiable start time, okay? So that's like 3 simple things you can do, okay? Now, some of you guys are also, you know, sort of sharing that, you know, you'll have different spaces throughout the day, and that is amazing, okay? Here are just a couple of other things that I would recommend. Move, exercise, do something fun. Now, a question that Kiara had was, my teachers upload all the week's work at once, and I'm trying to do it all on Monday, Tuesday, and then use the rest of the school time for assignments and study. And look, that is fantastic. That'll, of course, depend on school that you go to. Note with the sort of Department of Education and the Premier's announcements with school going from week 2 to some sort of weird rolling structure, which is going to be a nightmare for everyone, you may find that's a little harder to do, and that's where then just getting into sort of, you know, this sort of pathway will be really powerful. By the way, we call this the afternoon ritual, which is really important. It's creating an afternoon ritual, which is a set of habits and changes in time that, you know, you go through to actually create a transition. So this is incredibly, oh, that's not the color I want. Let's just do this here. So really, really critical, guys, that we want to actually put in place an afternoon ritual. Now, let me keep on going and answering some more of your questions, because there is more here. So let's have a look. What else do we have here? Okay, we have got a question that was to do with just what will happen with major works, visual arts, what will happen with science experiments and so forth, right? It's another sort of Corona-style question. And so just to answer that, what will be the impact of COVID on practicals? What will be the impact on, you know, major works? Look, at the moment, we're still, you know, so there's still ongoing announcements that are going to be made by NESA. NESA has sort of said there will be increased flexibility for this. There's going to be more flexibility, particularly if you're in a group work, you know, like for drama, for example. If you've got, you know, your performance piece. I think just to start with the practicals for science, I think, yes, they will be very difficult, you know, to be implemented, okay? So a lot of that's going to depend, though, on whether or not they can get you back into school this term. Okay, now note, remember, for the practical component, at the moment, week 3 in New South Wales, if you're in a public school, it's expected that you will be in school at least one day of the week. So that means, okay, that for this first one, I think it is highly likely, all right, if we look at our practicals here, it's highly likely that you are going to have practicals still. They will back end it for the end of term when it's likely to happen. That may also be the case, note, for some of the major works. So I think this could end up sort of drip feeding across all of them, okay? But I think what this will depend on is it really will depend on, you know, how effective it is that, you know, you end up getting back into school and then the administrative side of it. So what I would almost prepare for right now is still prepare for the likelihood that it will happen. If it doesn't, then fantastic, there's no loss, right? But if it does, you're not going to be surprised, or your peers might be surprised, but you won't be surprised. Now, what about independent schools? Will you follow public school rules? No, you don't need to. I mean, it's a recommendation. A lot of the private, independent, and Catholic schools have been doing their own thing already. For example, a lot of them are, online for the term. A lot of them are changing holidays. The strategy, though, most, sort of independent Catholic schools are using at the moment, though, if we look at that, is that they are trying to basically, like, I'm calling it back end everything, but basically that means try to push as much as they can as late as possible in the hope that things are somewhat more normalized again and there's a return to in-person. So again, while you're probably online for a good period of time, if you're at a private independent Catholic school, still expect that they will back end a lot of this so that it's still likely, if cases remain low, that you end up still having to do it in person. Okay, so that's that question. Now, Prashant's asked, do I think the HSC exams will be easier due to Corona? That is a good question. So the question is, will the HSC exams be easier? Honestly, I'm really torn about this one, Prashant. Okay, I'm really torn about this one simply for the fact of the matter that, yes, the exams sort of, they get finalized around this time of year for the HSC, so there's certainly been an opportunity to consider dialing back on complexity. I think at the same time, though, NESA is maintaining that the HSC is going ahead. There is, yes, some changes, but, there's nothing that NESA have indicated that they will change and make the exams easy. So I would say no. Sorry to be sort of a downer on you there. And I'm just going to, let's go with some thickness and some red. I'm going to say no. I do not think they will be easier, okay? But here's what I think will happen, okay? It's not all bad news, okay? I think they're going to keep the same standard. I think they're going to maintain the same standard of difficulty because they're going to need to do that. Because think about it, if they make it easier this year and then that becomes the paper that exists, then students that are doing past papers to practice in future years are going to get, this weird paper that didn't really make sense. It's going to have historical implications, I think, if they do that. I think what they will instead do is, and Kiara's like, will they mark a bit easier? Look, probably not necessarily either, because think about it. Even if they mark easier, that also influences what they publish around like sample band 6 response. Additionally, if they mark the same, everyone gets the same result, right? Like everyone's marks might be lower, but then they get, the marks will be scaled and moderated. So the thing to be mindful here, okay, yeah, it is a historical event, but even then, I think you've got to look at how do you minimize the impact of the historical event on the future. And so I think what they will do, and I think there is something that will happen, is I think they'll maintain the same standard, but, and here is the good news, okay, relatively, I think they will make it a little more flexible, okay, for claiming illness and misadventure. And I think that's actually how they'll handle it. And the reason I think that's how they'll handle it, guys, is that that's already the system that is built in. So rather than create a new system, rather than make huge amounts of change, I think the sort of more practical pathway here is, for consistency's sake, to not change the standard, but to use the existing system of illness and misadventure claims to actually handle cases whereby students have been disadvantaged due to Corona. So I think that is definitely an area. Now, the one thing that may change, yes, Shweta has asked, will there be fewer questions on practicals for science subjects? That is the one area, definitely, and potentially some of the performance side for the major works that still is a little uncertain because of what's happening. I think maybe what will happen is they will push back finalization of the exams a little bit longer just to see how schools go back this term. I think by middle of the term, if it's not been possible, then yes, they will practically need to actually make some changes in terms of the amount of questions that maybe cover some of the content. Could exams be shorter? Look, the only thing I think with the nature of the historical event, okay, is I think, will there be a significant change? Look, I think no, not yet. The only way I think, guys, there will be significant change in terms of exams shorter, in terms of significant content omitted, is, okay, if it's not possible to sit in an exam hall and do an exam, right? Then they're going to have to completely reinvent things. I don't think they're going to be able to chop and change too much content, though, short of the experiment practical side of things, because schools teach the content in all sorts of different sequences. One school might do mod 7 and then 8 and then go into sort of 5 and 6. And so as a result, or topics 1, 2, 3, 4, they might do it in a non-linear fashion. So if they start making decisions to, cut stuff like that, it gets really complex based on how schools approach it, which is why I don't think they'll do a slimmed down version of the syllabus, Jasmine, to answer your question. So that's why overall, I think they're going to try to keep it as similar as they can. And then like for extreme exceptions, okay? So extreme exceptions being around, if they cannot, if it proves that you cannot actually sit the exam itself, okay? If practicals are unable to be conducted, I think there's some of the changes that will happen, and obviously the performance stuff, for example, for drama. But I think everything else, like that would be like some exceptions. If you cannot sit an exam, major sort of huge issue. Practicals unable, and performances due to social distancing are unable to, right? Otherwise, guys, I think at the moment you should prepare for, the fact that it'll be the same standard, it'll be the same length exams, it'll be the same level of difficulty, but you'll be more flexible with illness and misadventure. So what that means is I would encourage you guys to go to the Nested website and start to have a look at what those misadventure and illness claims look like, because often they need a bit of foresight for you to be aware of what is available for you to claim. And so I would look there and see what's available, so that you can just identify, do I already have that happening to me now? Is this already impacting myself? And what evidence do I need to sort of collect, doctor certificates, otherwise, so that I can put in a compelling, case as part of my misadventure and illness. So hopefully that helps answer that. Let's keep on moving through a couple of other questions, guys, in the last 10 minutes. As I said, I have so many here, so I'm still trying to get through sort of the big themes that we have. Okay, let's have a look. We've hopefully got some bounce back. Okay, so one of the things I think we will have, okay, so Kiara's just asked, I'll answer this one quickly with the art body of works, if we make them at home. Yeah, there's going to be some discrepancy. I think that's probably one of the other ones I should add here, which is for art. I think there are some that there is just real practical implications where they're going to actually have to make some sort of changes to possibly the marking criteria there. But I think those are the exceptions to the rule, right? The rule being what we see here, these being the exceptions, right? Cannot sit an exam, it's unpractical to, practicals not being able to conduct it, performances not being able to be done, art being created, right? Potentially in sort of very different sort of settings, and creating potentially, some equity issues, right? In terms of people having better access to resources, to be able to create that art at home. So, one of the other questions that seems to be coming through here is notes, like what you should be doing for notes right now. I've seen that happen. I've seen it come through a couple of times as well. What should we do with study notes? So I'm just going to jump in and try to answer this. Now, in terms of study notes, awesome, Prashant. You've definitely gone into the vault. Those videos. Oh, geez. That's back in the day. So in terms of study notes, what do we do here, guys? Well, look, one of the things I'm going to recommend is that this is going to be really critical. And it's going to be critical. I mean, one, we sort of basically view notes as your foundation of knowledge. Okay, if you don't have good study notes, what we find is that, your foundation of knowledge tends to be pretty weak, and therefore your ability to consolidate that knowledge before your trials will be challenging. Now, the second thing to be mindful of is that if we think about trials, right, that's a lot of content, okay? That's like the entire HSC's worth of content. And you're going to need that for your trials. And so the thing that I would really encourage is a lot of students leave this, and the big mistake here, okay, the mistake that gets made is that you actually, students, leave it too late to try to get the notes together, and then they just really run out of time pre-trials. So what I would be recommending here, and I'll talk about the writing versus sort of typing sort of question as well, okay, is it too late to start now? No, it's not. That's the point of why I'm bringing this up. So great. Good question, Prashant. The reason this is really critical is that, actually writing the study notes is where you construct a lot of your knowledge, okay? That's going to be really, really important. It's not too late to start now, but it does mean that you've got a bit of work ahead of you. So if we go back up, guys, to this plan that we talked about for the trials, right? So remember that we were going to create this sort of plan for the next 14 weeks. What you want to really be doing here is you want to be looking at, let's say this is, I'm just going to use, look, I'm just going to use economics because I'm familiar with the guys, but we can apply this for really any subject that requires notes. What you would be looking at is there's 4 topics, okay? We know there's 4 topics. Most of the subjects have 4 topics anyway. And so what I would be looking at is, okay, I want to create a 2-week buffer at least, okay? So if I want to have a 2-week buffer, it gives me 12 weeks to actually get on top of my study notes, which means that I've got roughly 3 weeks per set of notes, right? So that means what's going to happen here is I know that, and I'm just going to change up the color. In these 3 weeks here, I need to, and I'd probably not start with the first topic, I'd start with the hardest topic. So let's say topic 4 here, I'm going to work on, right? And then I'm going to do the next 3 weeks, maybe topic 3, or maybe I'll go and do topic 1 because I haven't done that for quite some time and I want to get I want to refresh stuff, okay? Now, yes, Shay, I agree, you can get notes off the internet. The big challenge with that is going to be that you're actually going to lose all the value of creating study notes, or at least 80% of the value of creating study notes, okay? And the value of creating study notes, remember, is the construction side of things, okay? What's really important is that by actually going through and constructing notes, the actual act of construction of your notes is really critical. So the act of construction is very critical for actually building memory. So it's why we really encourage you to actually write these study notes. It's not necessarily because you just need a set of notes to go and study. It's the fact of the matter is if you're going and writing these study notes over the course of this term, what are you actually doing over the course of the term? You're actually revising the entirety of the HSC content. So by the time you get to your trials, you're in a really solid place instead of perhaps getting, 3 weeks out to your trials and going, oh, I'm going to access those notes from ATAR notes, or I'm going to access those notes from wherever, right? And I'm going to start trying to study them, right? It gives you a much shorter period of time. You don't get as much depth in understanding. And as a result, we just find that performance, and the performance that students achieve is not going to actually do it. So, critical thing here is, yes, this is why you want to do it. Now, good question. What do you do if you haven't done all the topics, okay? One of the things that we found, and I'm just going to write this down here, it was a really key state ranker strategy that we found, okay, in all of the research that we've done. And this strategy is incredibly simple, but really, 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 really important, okay? And that is you basically want to, and look, this is happening anyway as part of home learning, you want to actually go and teach yourself, and you want to essentially get ahead. Now, if you need to create your study notes on content that has not been taught, well, this is perfect. This is naturally happening, okay? We saw that students that particularly excelled did incredibly well, okay? No worries, Shay. Did incredibly well. They were students that had actually gone ahead and tried to just teach themselves the material. Let's be honest. Let's think about this. If you have had to teach yourself something hard in life, not even academically, just riding a bike, learning to drive, whatever, like things that are hard, we tend to remember and they tend to stick with us, right? So if you try to get ahead and teach yourself this, it means that it's actually going to stick with you a little bit more. You can ask better questions in class anyway to clarify your knowledge and understanding, and that would be the recommendation. So if we go back up to our plan here, guys, you would be still identifying the topic, okay? that you were doing, but it might be that that topic you're actually needing to teach yourself because you haven't yet done it in class, but you know that you may still get it in your trial, and therefore you want to make sure you are on top of it. Okay, so that would just be my suggestion here, is get ahead. Now, have the plan. In terms of how to do it, you've got really, I would say, two options in terms of weekly note writing. You either do, number one, you do, some notes every day. So you do notes every day and you do it for like, 45 minutes per day or something. And you pick a different subject each day. Now that requires a lot of discipline. That can be quite challenging because it depends on the assessment schedule that you get, okay? The second option is you pick one day and you get all your notes done. Now that could be, like a Friday, for example, or I know most students will do that on a weekend. They'll pick like a Sunday and often get it done on the Sunday. So that will be the suggestion. And note, when you're writing your study notes, what I want you to think of it as is I don't want you to think of, oh, I'm just writing my study notes. This sucks. This is boring over the next term. That's the wrong frame of mind entirely. What you should think about this as, guys, is you should think about it as, hey, I am, oh, sorry, guys, I just lost my screen share. Let me just share that again. Did you guys lose that? Let me have a look. What are you guys seeing? Yeah, you lost that as well. Okay. Let me see where that went. All right. Yeah, so there we go. We're back. Okay. So one of the things I want you to think of, guys, is I want you to think of this as, hey, I am actually doing preparation plus study for my trials. That's ultimately what the point of this note creation is. Okay, we're actually doing that to review the key areas of the course, construct your knowledge, build it, enable you to focus on weak areas. And so it's not really about creating study notes. It's actually about doing long-term prep towards your HSC trials. So I really want to encourage that. Now, yes, Jasmine, you may forget your notes now before it comes to studying it. What it does show, though, is that you're going to need it pretty soon anyway for your trials, right? So even if you do it a little bit earlier, it's going to come up pretty soon, okay? And then secondly, once we've learned something once, the speed at which we relearn it dramatically increases. So the key here is even if you forget it, when you need to relearn it for your trials, let's say, you're going to be able to pick it up so much quicker than if you hadn't really done it already and you were trying to learn it before your trials. So this is also about actually enabling you pre-trials to be able to revise, learn, and consolidate much, much quicker than you would otherwise be able to do, okay? So a couple of questions coming through on this. Does writing down things from PowerPoint count as note creation, or does it have to have the same benefits as note? Well, this sort of comes down to that question, guys, doesn't it, of pen, paper, handwritten. Really quickly, if we just sort of grapple with this debate of typed versus handwritten, this will probably be the final thing that we can get through today, just in terms of time. If we start thinking about the points here, though, guys, what we're going to, let me just do a line through here. What we're going to really identify is the benefits of typed, of course, is it's quick, okay? You can format it beautifully. You can add stuff to it, so it's a living document. That's really important, okay? You can add questions easily to it. They're really important benefits. The benefits of handwritten, of course, is it's more sort of exam prep, right? And it's building your handwriting muscle, which is really key. And really awesome about it is that it's also actually really good for building memory retention. The problem with handwriting is, unfortunately, that it is really slow, okay? So what I would be recommending here is to start with type it because it's about constructing knowledge. And remember, that's the value, it's the knowledge construction. Roughly sort of 3 weeks before your actual exams. What you would then be doing is starting to pull it out, identify those weak areas, and actually start to put pen to paper in rewriting and writing out sort of key concepts. Okay, so that is essentially what I would be recommending, okay? Oops, that was wrong, I wanted to keep that there. So the key recommendation here is type. Okay, that's going to be the winner that we're going to see for now. Okay, now, and you're going to write later. Okay, awesome. So guys, what I'm mindful of is I just want to make sure that there's any sort of last couple of overall big questions I can answer before we need to just close up for today. So I'm just checking the questions that have come through. What does Nicolette's ask, what does English Advanced Trials include? Yes, it will be, you know, your common module, and then it'll be modules A, B, and C. So it will, you should get everything. Is it better to write notes out or read them out loud? It's much better, much better to write them out, Sania. So please make sure you write them. Jasmine has asked, I find it really hard to summarize my notes and end up writing 20 pages. That's not so bad right now, Jasmine, in terms of knowledge creation and construction. Yes, you will need to try to dial it back as you get closer to, you know, the 3 weeks before your trials. This period here is when you would need to be sort of trying to really get quite succinct. Prashana's asked, should we record our notes and listen to them? Look, you're going to get more value from writing your notes and rewriting them than listening them. But if listening works for you, then definitely, okay? That's really, really critical. Okay, now is it worth rewriting all notes again to consolidate? Not all, but certainly a decent amount. Yes, you want to rewrite. It's a key memorization strategy. So that's maybe the final thing I'll just touch upon here, guys, because I've had a number of questions I can see coming through relating to memorization. And so let's just wrap on memorization as our final sort of area that we are going to look at, and then we will wrap up for today. Now, before I jump into memorization, what I will say, guys, is you know, number one, if you haven't already, we've got a whole lot of like videos on our YouTube channel that cover a lot of the questions you're actually answering, which is great. So, you know, I've shot a bunch of videos and, you know, actually, Prashant, I know you're on the channel a fair bit for YouTube. If you could actually share that in the chat, the channel, that would be amazing. Go and check out a bunch of the videos there. I dive into a lot more because I'm not going to be able to answer all your questions now. Okay, so I just want to flag that first of all, and then I'll jump into memorization strategies. The second thing that I would really encourage, you know, for you guys is that we also have, you know, over 500 articles on our blog, you know, artistsmart.com.au. If you haven't already used them, I'm assuming that's probably how you heard, though, about this webinar. Jump on. We've got a lot of stuff for specific subjects on how to write study notes, how to study for that specific subject. They're the more sort of detailed questions I've been unable to answer in depth today, and we have a lot of that, okay? So, awesome. Thank you, Felicity, for sharing that. That is the YouTube channel, guys, so you can dive in. The final thing before I share the memorization strategies here as well, thank you, Prashant, is if you need more support, guys, we do have an incredible team of tutors, teachers, and mentors that are here to help, from one-to-one through to small group classes. Everything we're continuing to do during Corona is live video, like what we're doing today, right? Video, interactive whiteboards. You know, we've got all of our new HSC syllabus resources as printed workbooks that we mail out to students so that you've got that, you know, as a guide in terms of notes, worked examples, practice questions. So there's a whole lot of amazing support. So if you do need the support, you may not, and if you don't, amazing, but if you do, check it out. We've also got a special just to try to help as many students as we can and be creative, where if you bring a friend, regardless, guys, of what subject you need support for, if you're needing help for chem, they're needing help for echo or English or maths, you guys both on enrollment get 4 weeks free for our classes, which is pretty awesome. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out, get in touch with us. Now, finally, I just want to run through the memorization component. Felicity, we do for economics, not for some of the other HSIE subjects. We don't, Josh, actually make the books available for sale. They're only available as part of the work that we do for students. So good question there. So I'm going to now wrap up. We're going to do memorization. I'm going to share a couple of simple strategies here, and then we're going to officially finish this Q&A webinar. And then we'll explore, I'll chat with the team in terms of future webinars that we can run to keep on just supporting you guys as much as we can during what is clearly a pretty challenging time. So, memorization. The first thing I'm going to highlight, and it's a really basic one, is, guys, rewriting is a really fundamental key memorization strategy. So what I want to highlight here is never only read something, okay? Our reading, when we read something, our memory retention absolutely sucks, okay? It's really horrible. So you want to avoid just reading your notes, okay? Really, really critically, what we want to be doing is whenever you want to actually memorize something, what I want you to think about is I need to put pen to paper and rewrite it. Now, what does that look like? That doesn't mean rewrite everything word for word, because you can do that rote learning. What that means is identify key ideas, identify, definitions, okay? Try to write down, little short answer responses. The key is put pen to paper. That is going to be one of your most effective memorization techniques you can use. We really highly recommend it. It's so simple as well, guys. There's no magic to it. It's just like, right, pen to paper. You should have, I remember when I went through both HSC and university, I'd have exercise books, guys, that just had like pages of me rewriting stuff. Now, I would never use this again. I was literally writing just to build memory, okay? So I was writing it on the exercise book to build memory, and that was it. So you should just get your notes out 3 weeks before your trials, okay? Get your exercise book out, start going through the hard parts of the course, and start actually writing and literally trying to teach yourself, okay? That's really, really important. Now, the second strategy I'm going to highlight here, and this is really important as well, is to actually try to teach others. And you can do this right now really well, okay? Jump on a Zoom call or a Skype call, okay, with a friend, okay? Do this at least once times per week for each subject if you can. And in that, actually identify, okay, here are the topics that we're going to teach, and teach each other. This is, we found to be one of the most critical study techniques to rapidly build memory, but to also identify weak areas. So if there were 2 strategies we would be recommending for memorization that are really basic, but please, you just got to go away and do them. We know they work. We see them work for so many students, okay, is rewrite and then teach others. Now, just to answer this question, Nishita has asked, is this method still effective if you type your notes initially? Yeah, it is, okay? In terms of the rewrite, although it's why you want to try to allow yourself as much buffer as possible. If you're already on top of your notes, by all means, then handwrite over the next term. But, I think most of you guys, my gut would be probably behind, and therefore having notes and constructing the notes as quickly as possible needs to be your priority, which is therefore type them and then move into the rewriting stage where you're going to use it. So the way that we would think about this, okay, guys, just to highlight this, is number 1, stage 1, actually, let me just do this here. Phase 1 of the process, okay, phase 1 is going to be actually construct your knowledge. And to construct your knowledge right now, speed is of the essence, okay? That's going to be really critical, which is why our recommendation is to type your notes. Okay, now then we get into phase 2, which is closer to your actual trials, okay? And now this is about actually, consolidating knowledge, consolidating and memorizing, okay? And when we get into this stage, this is where speed's not of the essence, okay? Actually, depth is going to be really critical. And that's why we're going to then use the rewrite strategy. Okay, so that's essentially, our sort of two zones, okay, that we're going to go into. So we're going to start on phase 1 over here, okay, and we're going to do that over the course of most of this term. And then we're going to transition into phase 2 as we get to roughly, if we can, about a month before trials. That's the sort of sweet spot, okay? So this should be, one to go. This should be 1 month pre-trials, okay? So that's essentially our strategies, guys. So look, hopefully today has been helpful. I can see it's been awesome. We've had sort of almost close to 80 people on throughout most of today's session, which is great to see. For you guys that came back after we couldn't get through all of the questions last time. Of course, guys, we are using a lot of the questions you have submitted to create ongoing resources as well, articles, videos, so forth. We've got something really cool coming next week that's going to be entirely free, guys. We're pretty excited about it. So stay tuned. It's just a resource we've been putting together to help HSC students specifically, just given the fact that you guys are all stuck learning from home. So stay tuned for it. It's going to be pretty cool, and we'll share it with you guys via email. Otherwise, guys, have an incredible what is left of the school holidays. There's only, 4 or 5 days, something crazy. And all the best as you return to, school in whatever form that may be for you.